The velvet rope shimmered under the warm afternoon sun, separating the elite from the rest. Luxury cars lined the curb. Drivers in suits opened doors, revealing guests dressed in designer gowns and crisp tuxedos. Cameras flashed. Laughter echoed. This wasn't just an event, it was the event. The annual Tech Vision Summit was where power gathered, where billionaires mingled, startups dreamed, and reputations were made. At the VIP entrance, a tall black man stepped forward. He wore a tailored navy blue suit. No tie. Just a simple, elegant pocket square. Polished shoes, clean shave, confident stride. He looked sharp, but not familiar. And that was enough. The security guard, a man in his 40s with a bored look and clipboard in hand, stepped directly into his path. "Whoa there, sir," the guard said, holding out a hand. "This entrance is for VIP guests only." The man offered a soft smile. "I know." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a black envelope, the kind used for executive-level invitations. The guard didn't take it. Instead, he squinted at the man, then at the line of guests forming behind him. A well-dressed white couple strolled past them, flashing a silver badge, the exact same kind tucked inside the envelope now being ignored. They were waved through with a grin. "No problem, enjoy the evening." The black man watched quietly, said nothing. He held the invitation out again, gently. But the guard still didn't move. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're probably looking for general registration." A pause. The man slowly nodded. Calm, collected. "I see." He slid the envelope back into his jacket. His voice was low, composed, but carried weight. "You're sure this is how you want to handle this?" The guard stiffened. "I'm just doing my job," he replied, glancing around as if seeking backup. "I don't make the rules. Look, if you don't have a guest escort or if your name's not on this list," he waved the clipboard with exaggerated authority. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he took a small step back, not in defeat, but like someone calculating something far beyond this moment. "I understand," he said. Then he smiled again. But this time there was something different. In his eyes, not anger, not pain. Something deeper, more dangerous. He turned away from the entrance, slowly, and walked back toward the street. As he passed a group of suited attendees waiting to be let in, one of them muttered under his breath. "Another one trying to sneak into VIP, pathetic." Another man chuckled. "They think a nice suit means status, bet he's an Uber driver." They laughed. Dismissively, casually. The man didn't react, didn't even look back. He simply opened the door of a jet-black Mercedes Maybach parked discreetly at the corner and stepped inside. The window tinted shut. From the outside, it looked like just another guest being turned away. But inside that car, sat power, real power. Because the man who had just been denied VIP access was Marcus King, the founder, majority shareholder, and CEO of the entire Tech Vision Group, the very company hosting the summit. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers gleamed above velvet chairs and gold-trimmed tables. The atmosphere buzzed with expensive perfume, clinking champagne glasses, and self-congratulating conversations. Everyone wanted to be seen. Men in fitted suits huddled in groups, talking IPOs and exit strategies. Women in flowing gowns compared whose startup had landed the biggest investor this year. This was where tech giants and hungry dreamers rubbed shoulders, or at least pretended to, and in a cozy corner of the VIP lounge, a table of mid-level, executives chuckled over overpriced cocktails. "Did you see that just now?" one of them asked, smirking over the rim of his glass. "Yeah," another replied, swirling his drink. "That guy in the navy suit tried to walk right in like he owned the place." A woman in the group scoffed. "He even had an envelope, thought he could fake it." Laughter followed. The first man leaned in, lowering his voice. "But not enough. I mean, come on. He didn't look like a founder." Another chimed in, chuckling. "More like a driver who borrowed his boss's jacket." The group burst to snickers. No one questioned it. No one asked who he was because they didn't have to. To them, it was obvious. Black, alone, unfamiliar. In their world, that didn't spell power. That spelled outsider. Across the room, two event coordinators were discussing the upcoming CEO presentation. "We still don't have confirmation on who's speaking for TechVision," one said, scrolling through her tablet. "No photo, just says Marcus King, keynote." "But no one's ever seen him," the other shrugged. "Probably some boardroom fossil who'll Skype in from a yacht." Behind them, a sleek man in a white blazer, Chad, the regional VP of a fintech firm, sipped his drink and muttered to his colleague, "I heard the guy never shows his face." "Probably some old white money hiding behind a fake diversity brand," his friend laughed. "Or maybe he doesn't exist at all. Just a placeholder name. You know how these big companies are. Smoke and mirrors." They clinked glasses. From Mesur. A distance, no one noticed the assistant coordinator near the media booth glance up, pause, and raise an eyebrow, because outside, in that same moment, inside the parked Maybach, Marcus King was watching them all. Live footage streamed to the car's monitor from hidden event cameras. Facial recognition software tagged names, titles, and voice snippets. Everything, every smirk, every whispered insult, was being recorded. Not out of revenge, not out of pettiness, but out of clarity. He needed to know which of these polished smiles were real, and which were masks. "Pause there," Marcus said calmly as Chad's face appeared on screen again. "Replay that line." His assistant, seated beside him, tapped a button. Probably some old white money hiding behind a fake diversity brand. Marcus leaned back, silent for a beat. Then he smiled. Not cruelly, not bitterly, but the kind of smile that knew exactly what was coming next. He glanced at his assistant. "How's the boardroom looking?" "Everyone's inside." "No one knows you're here," she replied. Marcus nodded. "Perfect." He glanced once more at the glowing screen, at the people laughing, whispering, judging. They all came here for power. His voice dropped, rich and steady, but they forgot who built it. Back in the ballroom, the host stepped onto the main stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 12th Annual TechVision Summit," she announced, smiling as a polite round of applause rippled through the room. "We're honored to be joined by some of the brightest minds in the tech world today. And tonight we'll be revealing some very exciting developments from our own founding company, TechVision Group." A buzz of anticipation sparked. "Later this evening," the host continued, "we'll hear directly from TechVision's very own CEO, Mr. Marcus King himself." Heads turned, a few furrowed brows. Marcus King. Wasn't that just a name on paperwork? The executives at the cocktail table looked at each other, puzzled. Chad frowned. "He's actually coming," the woman beside him whispered, "if he even exists." Across the room, a different man chuckled under his breath, not knowing who was listening. "Well, let's hope he's not the guy who tried to get into VIP earlier." That got another round of stifled laughter. No one noticed the staff coordinator, standing behind the curtain, pressing a finger to her earpiece and nodding silently, because the man they were mocking, the man they'd all dismissed, was about to walk through the front doors. Long before the limousines, long before the black card, the suits, and the empire, Marcus King was just a boy in a broken home, in a forgotten neighborhood, on the southwest side of Detroit, the kind of place where the streetlights barely worked, but the sirens always did. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father, well, when he was around, shouted more than he spoke. And Marcus? Marcus listened. He listened to arguments through the walls, to dreams whispered by tired neighbors, to the silence in his own room when everyone else had given up. He didn't have a computer, he didn't have a phone. What he did have was a library card, and that changed everything. Every afternoon, Marcus would walk 3 miles to the public library, just to sit near an old desktop computer, not to play games, not to scroll social media, but to learn. He devoured books on coding, design, artificial intelligence, and business. At 15, he was building websites for local barbershops and diners for $20 apiece. By 17, he'd Built an app that helped small stores manage inventory using just text messages. No one knew his name, but they used his work every day, and still. The world looked right through him. He remembered walking into a tech showcase at 18, wearing his only dress shirt, bought from a thrift store. The security guard that day laughed. "Are you lost, kid?" Marcus never answered. He just turned around and swore silently. "One day, I'll own a place like this, not just attend it, not just fit in, but own it." He didn't go to Stanford, didn't get an MBA, didn't have a mentor. He had failure. He had hunger. And he had a relentless belief that the system wouldn't save him, so he'd rebuild it. By 21, Marcus had 3 failed startups under his belt. By 25, he launched King Tech, a software-as-a-service company built from his bedroom. Investors ignored him, so he bootstrapped everything, slept on couches, worked out of coffee shops. One investor even told him straight to his face, "You're brilliant, Marcus, but you don't look like the kind of guy people trust with millions." Marcus remembered every word, every look, every laugh. Then, everything changed. In 2017, a Fortune 500 logistics company was hit with a massive software crash that halted their entire delivery system. Marcus offered a free trial of his system, no strings attached. It ran for 48 hours without fail. They signed a multi-million-dollar contract the next week. The rest was momentum. By 30, Marcus King was quietly running, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country, but still, he stayed behind the curtain. No Forbes interviews, no magazine covers. Why? Because he didn't want applause. He wanted to watch, to see who respected power and who only respected the appearance of it. So when TechVision Summit invited Marcus King as their keynote, he accepted but said nothing. No photo, no public RSVP. He wanted to see who would treat him like a CEO and who would treat him like a nobody. And now? He had seen enough. Inside the Maybach, he looked at his reflection in the glass. Same eyes as that kid in Detroit. Same fire. He took a deep breath, then turned to his assistant. "Let's go inside." "But through the front this time?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "No." He opened the door, stepping out onto the sidewalk. "We go in through the employee entrance, because Marcus King didn't need red carpets. He didn't need validation. He already knew who he was. But it was time. The rest of the world found out too. The employee entrance was a narrow hallway hidden behind the loading docks, far from the marble pillars and paparazzi flashes of the main doors. No red carpet, no welcome signs, just flickering fluorescent lights, and the quiet hum of background. Power. Marcus walked through it calmly, his shoes echoing on the concrete. A staff member, a young woman in a headset, looked up, startled. Sir, this entrance is for authorized personnel only." "I am authorized," he said gently, pulling out his badge. Not the flashy silver one used for VIP guests, but a simple black card. Her eyes widened as the scanner lit, up green instantly. Then she looked closer. Her lips parted in shock. "Mr. King." He nodded once. "Let's keep that between us, just for now." She swallowed hard, then gave the smallest of nods. "Of course." Marcus moved down the hallway, each step more deliberate than the last. He passed through catering stations, utility closets, and sound booths, until he reached the control room. Inside, 4 technicians were monitoring dozens of live camera feeds, the VIP area, the ballroom, backstage interviews. Marcus stepped in silently. No one noticed at first, then one of them turned and froze. "Sir," "Relax," Marcus said with a small smile. "I'm just observing." He pointed to one of the screens. "The VIP lounge. Turn up the audio on that table." It was them again. Chad and his group. Same entitled laughter, same careless jokes. "And I'm telling you," Chad was saying, "whoever this Marcus King is, he better show up soon or people are going to think it's just a PR stunt." The others laughed. A woman in a gold dress smirked. "Or worse, they'll think he's that guy who got kicked out at the door earlier." Marcus tilted his head slightly. So, they still hadn't put it together. Good. He turned to the tech team. "Patch these clips to my assistant. Timestamps included." I want them ready. Yes. Sir, he nodded in approval. Thank you. You've all done a great job tonight. After this, bonuses are coming. The team exchanged surprised glances. None of them had ever met the CEO. Until now. And he was nothing like they imagined. Back in the car, Marcus's assistant, Lena, tapped her earpiece. He's in, she said quietly, watching everything from control, and he wants full playback files. The driver looked up from the rearview mirror. Should I notify the board? Lena shook her head. Not yet. She glanced at her tablet, where a list of executive names flickered. All of them are inside, laughing, toasting, planning their next acquisition. Her voice lowered. They don't know the man they dismissed, owns everything they're standing on. Inside the venue, the stage lights dimmed slightly. The host stepped up once again. In just a few minutes, she said, we'll be hearing from the visionary behind Tech Vision Group, the man who took an idea from a basement and turned it into one of the fastest-growing firms in the world. A few scattered claps, but most people just looked around. Where was he? Back in the lounge, Chad raised an eyebrow. Think he'll actually show? Someone next to him shrugged. At this point, he's just a name on a program. Nobody's even seen him before. A third man laughed, sipping his bourbon. Watch it be that guy who got stopped at the door. That would be hilarious. Behind the curtain, just a few feet from the stage, Marcus stood still. He could hear everything now. The rustle of paper, the squeak of leather shoes, the low murmur of expectations. He looked down at his hands, calloused palms, fingertips that once bled from typing on second-hand keyboards. Hands that had built this entire empire from scratch. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. And then the host's voice rang out. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Tech Vision Group, Mr. Marcus King. The room went silent. Not politely quiet. Not, oh, here comes a speaker quiet. But dead. Still. Silence. All eyes turned to the side of the stage, and when Marcus stepped out, the air shifted. A wave of confusion swept across the crowd. Mouths opened. Hands froze mid-applause. Because, it wasn't some old white billionaire. It wasn't some faceless executive. It was him. The man they ignored. The man they judged. The man they laughed at. And now, he stood center stage, in the spotlight. For a moment, no one clapped. They just stared, as if the name they heard didn't match the man standing in front of them. Marcus King. Not an old white-haired mogul. Not a tech bro in a hoodie. Not a man with a golden nameplate or viral reputation. Just a tall, quiet, composed black man, standing under the spotlight, wearing the same navy blue suit they had mocked hours earlier. Chad choked on his drink. Wait, no way. That's the guy from the door. A hush fell over their table. The woman in gold blinked rapidly. But he got turned away. Another voice whispered, sharp with realization. That is Marcus King. And just like that, the weight of their laughter turned into the heat of shame. But Marcus, he didn't flinch. He scanned the crowd slowly, eyes calm, unmoving. Then he leaned into the microphone. His voice was deep, measured, and perfectly still. Before I speak on the future of Tech Vision, I'd like to talk about something more personal, something that happened just a few hours ago. A few heads turned nervously. Others leaned in, pretending to sip drinks. I walked up to this building earlier. Through the VIP entrance, I was dressed like this. I carried the official invitation. I said nothing, demanded nothing. A pause, and yet, I was stopped, dismissed. Not because of what I did, but because of how I looked. Murmurs swept across the room. The security guard who had turned him away was now standing at the back of the venue, his face drained of color. I wasn't angry, Marcus continued. I didn't shout, I didn't argue. I simply walked away. He smiled, just slightly, but that smile held centuries of pain and power. Because I knew I'd be standing here later. You could hear a pin drop, even the clinking glasses had stopped. In the crowd, Chad tried to shrink into his seat, Sweat formed at his temples. Beside him, the woman in gold fidgeted with her bracelet, her eyes darting. Marcus looked in their direction, but didn't call names. He didn't need to. They knew who they were. I've spent most of my life being told I didn't belong in rooms I built, doors I paid for, tables I designed. Another pause. Then, the room's audio screens lit up. Clips began to play. Live footage from earlier that day. Taken from the security cameras on screen. Marcus standing calmly at the VIP entrance. Being waved off. Ignored. Next, audio snippets. Voices familiar to the crowd and saying, he's probably an Uber driver. Sneaking into VIP. Pathetic. Bet he borrowed that suit. Gasps erupted. Some people looked down in horror. Others covered their mouths. Chad's face turned bright red. The woman in gold whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus looked at them, but never raised his voice. "You judged me by my skin, by your expectations, and by your belief that power only looks a certain way. But let me remind you, power doesn't ask for your approval." He stepped forward. It builds, it grows, and sometimes it watches. Another pause. Tonight I watched. In the control room, the technicians stared in awe. They had never seen a speech like this. No notes, no slides, just truth. This summit was meant to celebrate innovation. But innovation doesn't just mean better tech. It means a better world. And a better world doesn't start with code. It starts with character. The crowd was dead silent, not from boredom, but from recognition, you see. Anyone can wear a suit. Anyone can fake confidence, but integrity? That's the real badge. He let those words hang in the air. Then he turned toward the back of the room. To the man who turned me away, "I forgive you." The security guard froze. His eyes welled up, not just with shame, but with something deeper, humility. "But I hope next time you ask who someone is before deciding what they're not." Marcus returned to center stage. "To everyone else here, you still have time to decide what kind of leader you want to be, what kind of company you want to run, and what kind of person you choose to become when no one's watching." A long silence. Then, slowly, a single clap, then another, and another, until the room erupted into a standing ovation. But Marcus didn't bask in it. He simply nodded once, then stepped back from the mic. As the applause finally faded, Marcus King stepped off the stage. Not triumphant, not smug, but focused. He didn't need their admiration. He needed alignment. In the corridor behind the curtains, Lena, his assistant, was already waiting. With a folder in her hands, she handed it to him without a word. He flipped it open. Inside, a printed list of names, faces, positions, behavior notes from the summit, all compiled over the last 48 hours. "You want to begin with the board?" Lena asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. First, culture." He tapped the first name on the list. Kyle Brenner, VP of Operations East Coast. Notes beside it. Dismissive. Mocked keynote guest. Ignored inclusion protocols. Multiple past HR complaints swept under rug. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Did he know who I was?" Lena nodded slowly. "He knew your name, just not your face." Marcus closed the folder. "Then that's worse." Inside the ballroom, Chad tried to compose himself. The speech was over. The mask was cracking, and he was still there and standing. Among the executives, feeling naked in a room of suits, he tried to fake confidence, straightening his collar. But eyes were on him. Not with admiration. With distance. Suddenly, the man who always talked the loudest couldn't find anything to say. Backstage, Marcus entered a small glass-walled conference room. Inside, 3 of TechVision's top HR executives were seated, looking visibly nervous. He took a seat at the head of the table, then leaned forward, calmly. "Effective immediately, I'm reopening every unresolved complaint related to discrimination, bias, or cultural retaliation over the last 3 years." The lead officer blinked. "Sir, that's over 300 cases." Marcus nodded. "And every one of them will be reviewed, with outcomes made public internally." Silence. Then, also, every department head will be undergoing mandatory leadership. Retraining, not optional. Another HR rep swallowed. What about leadership? Marcus smiled. Leadership starts here. Back at the VIP lounge, word started to spread like fire. Marcus King is making changes. Reviews are coming. They're reevaluating the entire chain of command. People started slipping out. Quietly, nervously, some tried to pull favors. Some texted lawyers. But they all knew. The speech wasn't just for show, it was a warning. Meanwhile, Lena sent out a string of secured emails from a private server linked directly to Marcus. Subject line: Internal Cultural Realignment. Action required. Recipients: every TechVision senior leader, investor, and advisor. Inside the email, you may have heard Marcus speak tonight, but if you listened closely, you understand. This is not a PR moment. This is a turning point, effective immediately. All promotions are frozen pending equity. Review: all performance metrics will be paired with peer respect indexes. Executive bonuses will now include diversity and integrity benchmarks. Reactions varied. Some replied with support, others with panic. But no one dared stay silent. Later that night, Marcus sat in a private lounge, lights dimmed. Lena placed 2 glasses of bourbon on the table. He didn't drink it right away. He was still listening. I'm assuming some people will resign, Lena said. Marcus looked up. If they do, then they were never really building with us anyway. He finally took a sip. Then he looked toward the large window, out over the glittering city skyline. We don't need more polished resumes. We need people who see people, who don't need a name tag to treat someone with dignity. The next morning, LinkedIn was flooded with quiet announcements. After much thought, I've decided to pursue new opportunities outside of TechVision. Grateful for the time I've spent at this company. On to the next chapter. But Marcus wasn't reading LinkedIn. He was already 3 steps ahead. He was reviewing new leadership proposals. Among them, a woman from the front desk, the same one who had whispered his name when he walked in quietly the night before. She had treated him like a human being, even when she didn't know he was CEO. Now, she was being considered for a leadership training, not because of her degree, but because of her decency. Back at headquarters, the old rules were falling, and something new was rising. Not just a company, a culture. The stage was quiet again. The lights dimmed just slightly, enough to make the atmosphere shift from glitz to gravity. Marcus King stepped back onto the stage, but this time there was no polite applause, no jazz music, no camera flashes, just silence. The kind of silence that weighs, the kind that means everyone in the room knows something serious is about to happen. Marcus looked out at the audience. His eyes scanned slowly, not for drama, not for dominance, but for truth. He was looking for the ones who understood and the ones who still didn't. What happened last night was not about one man at a door. Marcus began, his voice calm even. It was about something bigger, something rooted. He took a breath, then continued. It was about a culture, a silent agreement that says power looks a certain way, that access belongs to a certain group, and that everyone else needs to prove themselves twice just to be seen as half. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded, others fidgeted. A few looked like they wanted to disappear. Marcus tapped his earpiece. Behind him, a screen lit up. This time, not with video clips, but with names. First 1, then 2, then 5, each, with a title beneath it: VP of Strategy, Regional Director, Senior Partners, and so on. Faces turned white in the crowd. People shifted in their seats. Because those names, they weren't random. They were the ones who had laughed, the ones who had mocked, the ones who had built their status on exclusion. These individuals, Marcus said, gesturing to the screen behind him, will no longer be part of TechVision's leadership team. The room gasped. Genuine shock. Some clapped, softly, unsure. If it was allowed, Others stayed frozen. One man stood up and visibly shaking. "Mr. King, please, I didn't know." Marcus raised a hand, just slightly. "You didn't ask." Silence. We cannot build the future with leaders who can't recognize the value of basic respect. We cannot innovate if we refuse to evolve. And we cannot claim success while we ignore who we're stepping over to reach it. A woman in the back wiped a tear from her eye. Another, closer to the front, finally raised her hand. "Mr. King, what comes next?" Marcus smiled, not out of victory, but out of purpose. "What comes next is reconstruction." The screen changed again, this time. New names. Some familiar, most not. Frontline workers, junior developers, outreach volunteers, interns turned consultants, people who had been overlooked for years, but had always shown up with heart. We're promoting. From within, we're investing in those who've proven integrity over image, and we're redesigning the entire framework of how power moves within this company. His voice hardened, just slightly, because leadership isn't about being seen, it's about seeing others. The crowd stirred, but this time, not with discomfort, with realization. The tides had changed, and Marcus wasn't asking for permission. In the back of the room, Chad sat stiff as stone. He didn't make the list on the screen. Not yet, but he knew the spotlight was close. He looked down, clenched his fists. It wasn't fair, he told himself. He didn't mean anything by those comments, it was just a joke. But deep down, he knew it wasn't a joke, Marcus had said, as if reading his thoughts. It was a mirror. And some of you didn't like what you saw. Then Marcus turned and faced the audience one last time. You don't get to choose who's worth respecting, but you do get to choose whether you grow. He stepped back. The lights dimmed further. This time, the applause wasn't delayed. It wasn't forced. It roared. Real, loud, earned. Not for a show, but for a shift. Backstage, Lena waited with a clipboard and a quiet nod. "Everything is in motion," she said. Marcus didn't respond right away. He looked out through the curtains toward the people who once whispered, and now stood. Then he said, "Good, because we're just getting started." The next morning, the building felt different. Not louder, not busier, but cleaner, as if the walls had finally exhaled after holding their breath for years. Emails flooded inboxes. Subject, policy update, inclusion, metrics now active. Subject, your team will be audited for culture compliance. Subject, leadership restructure, internal promotions prioritized. Some employees read in disbelief, some in relief, but all of them read with attention, because everything had changed. Not just the headlines, not just the people at the top, but the expectations. In the HR lounge, a woman named Tanisha, a mid-level administrator who'd been overlooked for years despite outstanding reviews, walked into a morning meeting. Everyone paused when she entered. A man who'd never acknowledged her before suddenly stood and offered his seat. She raised an eyebrow, surprised, but said nothing. Later, as she passed by the elevator, two executives who had once laughed behind her back now nodded politely. One of them even said, "Good morning, Miss Brown." Her steps slowed, not because she was afraid, but because she was starting to understand. They finally saw her. Meanwhile, in the downstairs cafeteria, a janitor named Luis sat alone, as he always did, until a young product manager, who used Opco to walk past him daily without a glance, came over carrying 2 coffees. "Mind if I join you?" Luis blinked, then nodded slowly. "Sure." The man sat down, and for the first time in 5 years, someone asked him about his life. Not his mop, not the trash, but his story. The ripple effect was real. You could feel it in every hallway, every conference room. People weren't just saying the right words, they were rethinking assumptions, rethinking habits, rethinking what it really meant to see someone. Not everyone embraced it. Some pushed back. Why is everything about identity now? Is this about performance or feelings? Do we even need to change if we're already making money? But those voices were getting quieter, because Marcus hadn't just changed policy. He'd changed the definition of value. 1 week after the summit, Marcus hosted a virtual town hall. No filters, no script. He sat in a modest office, sleeves rolled up, eyes direct. Some of you may be wondering, he began, if this is just a wave, a trend, something that'll pass. He leaned forward. It's not. This isn't about being politically correct. This is about being correct. It's about making sure talent doesn't need a title to be treated with dignity. It's about making sure power doesn't blind us to decency. And it's about making sure the next Marcus King doesn't get turned away at the door. The chat on the live stream filled with comments. Finally, a CEO who gets it. This makes me want to work harder, not for a bonus, but for a purpose. Tearing up. This is what leadership looks like. Sharing. This with my whole team. Meanwhile, Chad. He sat in his office, door closed, laptop open to a blank resignation letter. He stared at it for hours. He didn't know whether to send it, or stay and try to be better. For the first time in his career, he couldn't charm his way out. He couldn't bluff. He had to face something he'd never had to before. Accountability. Downstairs, the security guard, the same one who had turned Marcus away, was quietly finishing his shift. He was still employed. Marcus hadn't fired him, but his face had been heavy all week. As he stood by the new training posters on respectful engagement, a hand touched his shoulder. He turned. Marcus stood there, not angry, not smug, just calm. Sir, the guard said, voice cracking. Marcus stopped him. I know. He looked at the poster behind him, then back into the man's eyes. You get to choose who you become now. And with that, Marcus walked away, leaving behind a silence that healed rather than hurt. That was the legacy. Not just that Marcus had power, not just that he used it, but that he used it to open eyes, not just doors. Across the country, companies began referencing tech vision in their own equity meetings. Across the internet, young black professionals shared clips of his speech with hashtags, See Us. Built from nothing, power and grace, justice in real time. Across boardrooms, the question began to shift from who belongs here to what have we been blind to, and in the small library where Marcus first learned to code, a plaque appeared, etched in bronze. It read, he came here with nothing but curiosity and courage. He left to build an empire, and came back to build a better world. 3 weeks after the summit, the TechVision headquarters no longer felt like a monument to profit. It felt like a movement, from the way interns were greeted by executives in the morning, to the fact that janitors now had nameplates outside. Their break room. It wasn't just about being inclusive, it was about being intentional. Marcus stood at the top floor, looking down through the glass walls of his office. Below him, the team was setting up for a press conference. His first public statement since the night he flipped the entire room. Lena walked in with a folder. Final draft of the culture code, she said. Placing it gently on the desk, Marcus opened it. Page 1. Tech Vision Values. Humanity over hierarchy. Merit over masks. Truth over titles. Compassion over credentials. He nodded slowly. This, he said, is the legacy. Lena smiled. They're already calling it the King Code. Downstairs, the press gathered, not just tech bloggers and financial journalists, but educators, community leaders, nonprofit directors, young students with notebooks, because this wasn't just a business story anymore. It was a people story. Marcus stepped up to the podium. No fancy light show, just a mic, just truth. A few weeks ago, I walked into a building I built and was denied entry. That moment could have been a footnote, a quiet injustice easily forgotten. But I chose not to forget. I chose to listen to it. He looked directly into the cameras, and because of that moment, I saw the cracks in our foundation, not just at TechVision, but across our industry. We have glorified innovation while ignoring empathy. We've chased growth, but forgotten grace. He paused, then said the words that would be quoted across newspapers worldwide. This company will no longer be built on silence. The crowd applauded, but Marcus wasn't done. Effective immediately. Go. We are investing $50 million into a national mentorship initiative for underrepresented youth in tech. 2. Every executive bonus will be tied to ethics-based leadership. Performance. 3. Our hiring process will be anonymized in first rounds to eliminate bias. 4. We are launching an internal leadership path for frontline staff. He looked up. Because janitors can have genius, receptionists can have vision, and no one should ever need to look like power to hold it. The room erupted in applause. Tears streamed down a few faces. Not because of charity, but because of justice. In another part of the country, a high school teacher paused the live stream and turned to her students. That's what leadership looks like, she whispered. A young girl in the back, black, quiet, usually overlooked, wrote Marcus King's name at the top of her notebook, then underlined it twice. Back in the building, former employees who had been dismissed in past years under unfair circumstances received a letter. Subject line, Reevaluation and Redemption. Inside, we acknowledge past wrongs. We invite you to reapply with priority consideration. If you've grown, we want to grow with you. It wasn't just corporate healing, it was human repair. Chad? He did send that resignation letter, but he also sent something else. A handwritten note. It read, "You were right. I saw what I wanted to see, not what was there. I mocked what I feared. If there's a way to earn trust back, I'll be working for it quietly." Marcus read it, didn't smile, didn't scoff. He folded it once, placed it in a drawer labeled Character in Progress. Elsewhere, the security guard, James, who had once blocked Marcus at the door, was now standing at the new Welcoming Desk initiative. He'd been promoted to head of front-facing experience, a program designed to train all entry point staff in empathy, cultural intelligence, and first impressions. When asked how he got the job, he said, "I failed once and someone gave me a chance to do better." That's what justice looked like. Not revenge, not public shaming, but transformation. Marcus sat at his desk that evening, looking out at the skyline. Lena entered again. "They're asking if you'll accept the Business Person of the Year award." He didn't even look away from the window. "No," she tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I don't want to be remembered for what I won. I want to be remembered for what I fixed." 1 year later, the Tech Vision Summit returned. Same venue, same velvet ropes, same high-profile guest list. But something felt different. This time, the buzz wasn't about who was richest. It was about who had changed. Outside the entrance, a line of luxury cars rolled in. But instead of bodyguards and ego, there were volunteers holding signs that read, "Welcome, you matter." Innovation begins with kindness. Inside, a young woman in her early 20s, freshly hired for reception, stood at the front desk. She greeted each person the same way. "Hi, I'm so glad you're here." No more squinting at name tags, no more raised eyebrows. Just open doors. At the new VIP entrance, a man stepped forward. He wore a weathered gray hoodie, old sneakers, no watch, no jewelry, but his eyes were clear. Behind him, a few attendees murmured, uncertain. Is he in the right place? But the guard at the door, James, the same man from a year ago, smiled warmly. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the summit." The man blinked. I thought this was VIP access." James nodded. "It is. And here, that just means you're human." The man stepped inside, and somewhere behind the curtain, watching on a quiet monitor, Marcus. King smiled. He wasn't speaking this year. He'd declined the keynote. "I've said what I needed to say," he told Lena. "Now it's their turn." She agreed. So instead of a solo speech, the stage was filled with new voices. A former janitor shared his journey from floor cleaner to operations advisor. A single mom, once a contract assistant, now led an entire design team. A neurodivergent intern spoke about building the company's most inclusive app yet. And when they spoke, the crowd didn't applaud because of pity. They applauded because of respect. In the final hour of the event, the host stepped up. "There's one more story you should hear," she said. And then she invited Marcus onto the stage. He walked out slowly, humbly, not as a boss, not as a symbol, just as a man who once stood outside a door he built and was told he didn't belong. He looked out at the crowd. Not all of them knew that story, but many did. "1 year ago," he began, softly, "I stood right here, and not for applause, not for attention, but to deliver a mirror. What you did with it was up to you." He looked at the volunteers holding signs, the new leaders seated on stage. "You chose to reflect. You chose to rebuild. You chose to grow." He let that breathe, then a small smile. "And now, I don't need to tell you what justice looks like. You're living it." After he stepped down, Marcus didn't return to the VIP section. He walked to the back, found a seat in the general audience, and sat next to a young black boy wearing a name tag that said, "Student Guest, Future Coder." The boy looked up at him. "You're the guy," he whispered. From the speech, Marcus smiled. "I'm a guy, but maybe one day you'll be the guy." The boy grinned. "And Marcus?" He leaned back, content because he didn't need a microphone anymore. His justice was already speaking, and the world, it had its eyes wide open, finally.